Hey, everybody, I am back with another conversation with movers and doers here in the Midwest, specifically right now, Metro Detroit. And I'm sitting here with Miss Lauren Daniels. Lauren is a powerhouse. She is the founder and CEO of Sumptuous Spirits, which we'll talk about. She's also the chief business officer of Opulence Galleries, which to me, I have a lot of questions as well because it's in two different cities. So everybody welcome the amazing Lauren Daniels. Hey, Lauren.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We've connected. So we reconnected when I came home. Lauren and I, we first knew each other. I knew of Lauren when Michael and I moved here. Well, I moved back and I learned of Sumptuous Spirits and I thought, what an amazing business model. But since then, Lauren and I reconnected through a series of events and just me being more intentional with going out and about here at home. So Lauren, tell us, I have so many questions, but tell the folks about what Sumptuous Spirits is, how it started, and where you guys are today, because I think the story is pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. First, thank you for having me. I'm so glad to chat on this platform. I know we've chatted a lot outside of this, but so happy to be here with you. So yes, Sumptuous Spirits. For me, I'm a Detroiter, went to Cass Tech, graduated, went away to school in the state of Alabama at an HBCU called Miles College. Was super excited because I graduated with my degree in accounting and I was coming back to work as an auditor here in Detroit. When I came back to Detroit in 2012, Detroit was in its resurgence. So Dan Gilbert had just, kind of moved to the company. We're building all these companies. We're moving downtown. And they were having a lot of these young professional events or mixers, networking events, but not in the bars and restaurants that we were used to seeing, but in their own spaces. And so a lot of times I would attend these events, again, freshly new back to the Detroit and the new market that's growing here.
Yep.
And I'm like, man, there's these like cool spaces and all of that. But then the bar service was just not matching the ambiance of the event. I will never forget. I attended a networking event that I was in the door in a line and I said, okay, I'm waiting in line. I'm thinking it's the check-in table, but to find out it was actually the bar wait. I said, oh, we have got to fix this because I'm a cocktail girl. I'm all about aesthetic and appearance, especially when
Mhm.
you're putting on an event. So while I was getting my MBA at Wayne State University, I attended bartending school and started Sumptuous Spirits in 2016. And since then, to date, we're actually in our 10-year of business. And
Amazing.
so we've grown to 63 cities across Michigan and Illinois, primarily serving social, professional, and corporate events. So we've got to work with some amazing people, Google, WeWork, the big three. We've done things with Bumble, Foot Locker, Forbes. So it's just been an amazing journey. And I always knew when I started that I wanted to be a B2B bartending company that has staff that can really take what businesses are doing and what they're celebrating, but also tie that to the service with the bar.
What I love about that story, and I love to see how it's grown, is because you were using your own experience and quite frankly, building something in what I call like that utility category of solving a problem. Just like,
Yeah.
okay, because how many people, let's be real, everyone every single day encounters something that's like, that could be better, or why don't we have this? But it takes a different kind of person to say, okay, what can I do to solve this? And I love that you meticulously said, okay, I'm getting my MBA at Wayne State. Kudos to Wayne State. Shout out because they're killing it. And then tangentially say, I'm also going to educate myself and get this other skill set, this other piece of training within this vertical to make sure I know how to do the thing. That was really telling for me because in that moment, when you were going through both, I want to talk about that mental change right now because a lot of folks are going through
Mhm.
change with work, jobs, career.
Yeah, so
Today,
true.
we're recording this the day that Amazon announced more layoffs, UPS announced more layoffs. There's so much uncertainty going on right now.
Sure.
At that time, you came back during the resurgence, as you mentioned. What were you thinking? I'm not saying what you think in a bad way, but as you're balancing your MBA classes and your bartending classes, you have no revenue coming in, but you knew that you had to get the skill set in this vertical to be that subject matter expert. Let's talk about that because in my eyes, that's kind of a pause because I saw your LinkedIn. If you guys go to Lauren's LinkedIn, she was working at a bank and she was doing some pretty legit top tier executive level work. But then you're going to bartending school. I want you to
Mhm.
talk about that. I want you to talk about that training and how you put yourself in a different type of zone. that may not have been comfortable.
Yes, no, I love how you state that because even as you're talking and thinking back, literally there are three mindsets, right? So to your point, I was an AVP at the bank that I was working with as a financial auditor. For those who are in the industry or are familiar with the levels, that was me at like 20, was it 2004? I was an AVP. So, that was, humbly a really good position for somebody for me at the age at that time. But
You
then
earned it.
also being a student, right? So like having to leave there and get into that learning again, right? So it's just like getting back in the mindset of like learning and being a student, but then also going to bartending school and literally learning a new skill set in like
Yes.
a less corporate professional. Like you're there with the people who have been working at their neighborhood bar for like 20 years. So it's
Right.
different mindsets, different environments. And I think that's what really made me, I guess, a lot more flexible and understanding of the things that I'm doing because simultaneously I'm in these different engagements as I'm doing different things in my life, in the corporate, in the learning, but then also building a business. And so it was really understanding the importance of the learning. One, in all three of the environments, but two, specifically as I'm building a business. I didn't just want to go into it and start it. I knew
Right.
I didn't want to be the bartender, but I needed to understand the basis of it from the business side, which I got from my MBA program, but also too on the back end, which is why I felt going to bartending school was so important. So not just pulling the people from there, but what do they experience on the other side of the bar? So that way, as a business owner, I'm making sure, not only just as we're engaging with people, but what do the staff need in order to do their best job?
And that's empathy. And that's also understanding as a boss, as a business owner, if someone tries to check you with, it should be la 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 la, you can say, well, I've experienced X, Y, and Z, and I can tell you this is how it should be. I think that's such a big deal. And I really think that what you did can be applied to today. Obviously, we're talking about different jobs and talking about AI, and we've talked about it, you and I one on one. I think that getting out of comfort zones, if anyone's watching this, getting out of your comfort zone and taking that pause is not such a bad thing. So you've expanded to another state. It's grown with all these companies. And you then, I've learned, started going and doing these events with places that you part own. Let's talk about the tangential piece of this, opulence. Let's talk
Mhm.
about opulence and what that is and how that's playing a role with Sumptuous Spirits.
Yes, absolutely. So Opulence Gallery is in the Chicagoland area. So Sumptuous Spirits, a few years into business, literally right before the pandemic, we extended into the Chicagoland area. Again, just natural extension of what we were doing here in Detroit because we were servicing businesses. Of course,
Mhm.
Chicago also has a ton of corporate entities who were looking for our same type of boutique services that added to their brands and things like that. So we expanded to Chicagoland area. However, my parents are from Chicago. I still have a ton of family in Chicago, and they were interested in seeing what I was doing and bringing it into the south suburbs. So, in the Chicagoland area, of course, you got in Chicago, that's where a lot of things happen. However, a lot of people work and play in Chicago, but they
All
live
day.
in the suburbs, right? As you
All
know,
day.
right? As you know, you go home to the suburbs. And what we were finding is that people always had to go to the city, which, we love, but has its things. Things are super expensive there. Parking is really hard to come by. So, how do we figure out how to give that same experience and bring it to people where they are so that they don't feel like they all have to flock to one area? And so, for us, we decided to bring the event experience to the south suburbs with Opulence Gallery. So, it's two mothers, two daughters, myself, my mother, my cousin and my aunt, and we started in 2019, slated to open in April of 2020. Now we know what happened in 2020, right? So March hits, we're closed. We're like, oh my God, we just built this space we can do nothing with, right? But luckily we were able to get through it and kind of work through things because it was a need, right? So while it was still hard trying to navigate through the pandemic, we are now in our 6th year of business with the galleries and providing a great space for people in the south suburbs where they live and engage without having to go to the city and still giving them that good modern experience for their events.
Again, I'm going to say it, utility. As someone who spent 2 decades in Chicago and Chicagoland, what you're saying is spot on because you're done with work, you head home. If you haven't, many of you have been to Chicago, you know the traffic can get gnarly. That's why Michael and I, my husband, we joke, if we have to drive 20 minutes here, it's not that big of a deal. Some folks say it's so far, and we're like, you have not been on 290.
No, not at all.
You have not been on the Dan Ryan. But you're right, because you go home, you relax and you're like, okay, but you really want to go back outside and hop on the Dan Ryan to get into the city, try and find parking. I do love my friends at Parkways, love you guys, Spot Hero as well. But why not have it in your backyard? Again,
Yeah,
I think that's really smart. And I love that it's not even a pivot. To me, it's a tangential way of expanding the business of what you guys already are doing. Again, I think you have this amazing knack, and there aren't many people that can do it, in my opinion, whereby you see something that is a need and you're instantly able to connect the dots of, okay, this works here. We can elevate this piece there and so on. The other thing I want to talk about, because I want to talk about all the things that Lauren's working on and then I have a bunch of questions about entrepreneurship, fundraising, challenges that she sees from a startup perspective. But I also want y'all to know about the third thing that she's working on. So Lauren, there's also something I know because of your experience in hospitality, another piece of utility that I think you found could be fixed. Would you like to talk about that?
absolutely. New Genius. So excited about that. That is literally the sprint as of now that I have been
Okay.
working on the heaviest. So Venue Genius, you know, as you see, is just a natural extension of what we're already doing in hospitality. So Venue Genius is a SaaS tool that we're working on that connects venue owners and managers to their vendors for day of communications. So think Slack for hospitality. So it will be a live day of collaboration tool for which everyone can connect on. So no longer looking for that spreadsheet or that Google Doc or trying to find the caterer's number. We're putting everything in one place for everyone to access in real time, get updates real time without having to navigate those things that can essentially make business hard, make the experience hard for your host, or make it a bad experience on the vendor side. So we're literally in a process now of piloting that with 6 venues here in the Detroit area. We'll be kicking that off next month to test and refine in the later part of the year, begin to fundraise as we begin to beta test and expand.
Amazing. So, Lauren, now I'd love to talk about, because, obviously you mentioned you're from Detroit. The business started in Detroit. There's been a lot of great movement happening from a startup ecosystem perspective here back home. It's been amazing for me I looked at it from afar when I was in Chicago, but now that I'm back home, it's been so great to fully get immersed in all the activity. What are your thoughts? I want to start high level with what do you think? What are your thoughts about the movement and activity? Because as you said, you're coming into your 10th year with Sumptuous Spirits. You've seen a lot. So let's talk about that. What would you like to share about your experiences when you started the business and how things have evolved in Detroit and Michigan when it comes to the engine of startup or new ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just start first of all with saying that what I love about the Detroit ecosystem in general that I don't see everywhere is that Detroit really is a good melting pot of innovation with founders who don't necessarily gatekeep. They like to share. We like to engage. And that's across industries. A lot of times what I see is that if you're somewhere, the tech people are on one side, you got your, hospitality on the other side. Detroit is kind of a melting pot because we've had to get it from the ground up. We're a city of grit. We work hard and we want to see other people succeed, right? So I love that we're a city full of innovation and innovators who, want to grow and do great things. And I feel like that's a lot of why Sumptuous Spirits is successful because
Mm.
I've had people who have made introductions just organically, or they see me somewhere and want me somewhere else. So I love that about Detroit and the Detroit ecosystem. What I'm also finding now is that, of course, we're doing a ton in tech, which has been amazing. I myself have gotten into tech. And so the growth of the tech innovation here has not yet been matched by the resources. And so a lot of times that's where we see the gap and the frustrations from both the investor side who have, Michigan and Midwest naturally are a bit more conservative than some markets versus the founders who are like ready to go, but feel like they're either accelerated out or talked out or mentored out and are finding themselves having to find resources elsewhere. My friends and I always like to say Detroit's or Michigan's ecosystem is like a toddler, right? Like we're growing and we're moving and we're excited and we're trying to move faster than like what our feet can do. And I think that's like a good way to kind of showcase where we are with Michigan now, right? We have all these innovators, but the resources have not yet matched the talent that we have here, which isn't a bad thing. What I'm finding now is that people are going out, bringing it back, bringing the resources, bringing the knowledge so that we together can grow as a state here.
Let's talk about how we're defining resources for folks to understand too. Do you mean venture capital? Do you mean mentorship? Do you mean public private partnership? What types of resources, if you had a wish list that you
Mhm.
think in your travels, because you went to just where you went to school in the South, also you're experiencing traveling everywhere and running events everywhere. What would be your wish list of extra resources that the state could use for entrepreneurs and startups?
Yeah, I think obviously funding in general for startups and where funding begins. So right now, I think it's like a hit or miss. There's not really a hard definition of what's founder ready or what's funding ready for our founders. And so there is a lot of
Mhm.
confusion or people aren't quite sure where, to hit the ball of this is where they say this is what defines what makes me venture backed ready or funding ready or to get that first check, right? So I think that's where a lot of the issues lie. So funding is one of them. I don't find, at least in my I find that mentorship and engagement has been great for me here. So
Awesome.
again, all of that is here, right? We got some great accelerators, we got some great mentors, we got some amazing people. But where the gap is a lot of time is funding or introducing ourselves to other funders who can cut those checks. And we're having to always go out of state to find those people. So for me, that's where the resource gap is.
And I think that honesty is important, and I think that if we hear or if the community hears what proven founders need or see and how we can move the dial forward, I think is so important. I Since being home, it's great to see all these different organizations, and I finally see it links being a bit tighter amongst different groups. But like you said, the mentorship and people being so open to connections and making sure you know the right people has been phenomenal. And
Mhm.
the term flywheels come up quite a bit with let's get the flywheel going. And I
Mhm.
would agree. I think we can use more. So, for example, with you and what you're doing with Venue Genius and other items under your docket, man, like you could be an example no pressure.
Yeah.
No pressure. No pressure, Lauren. Go, go, go. But that to me is exciting in terms of a roster. Back in the day when I was at Orbitz, someone didn't make one. They wrote one. It was like a post back in the day. But there was almost a family tree of people at Orbitz and other tech startups in Chicago like Groupon and Grubhub
Mhm.
that were funded by a similar group, and I think it was Lightbank. Orbitz wasn't funded by Lightbank, but there was different like family histories and origins that came out of things. I know right
Mhm.
now we have a couple, but it'd be nice to have more. So let's talk about your experience as a founder, a female founder.
Yes.
How has that been?
Honestly, it's been pretty good. I will say being in hospitality has been interesting
Mm,
because on one side, especially a lot of times with the people who actually put on events, they're women, they're other women founders. That has been great. And again, it's a great shared atmosphere. However, a lot of times on the back end or when we're working with, various corporations, companies, a lot of times it's male driven. And what I have gotten in the past, when they find out, we're Sumptuous Spirits, they're engaging with me, they want to know who the owner is. And it's like, well, I'm the owner. I'm the founder of this thing. And it's always the questions of, oh, so you're the founder, you have all these teams. Oh, that seems like a lot. Like I've gotten that a ton. And it's always very hilarious to kind of like, meet the energy of them and not necessarily in a bad way, but like, yes, you're running your, multi-location organization. I too am doing that thing. And so it's just like you can do it, we as women can do that too.
Well, speaking of things that women can do, and another event that I went to, Lauren had a great session on automation and a great session for business owners about ways they could automate different administrative parts of their business. And what I love about you too is that on top of all the things that you discussed, by the way, Lauren's also a mom. On top of all the things that you discussed, you're also still doing things within the community and speaking on panels and helping other entrepreneurs who are starting with things that you did and you learned from. I think that's tremendous because you want to still continue seeing people thrive. How has that balance been like with the three things you got going on from like formal business standpoint, LLCs that you have, if you will. Then you're also doing mentorship and giving back there. I'm not going to ask the question of how do you balance it all? No, I'm going to ask, how are you able to ensure that the intention you have to the extra things you do outside of the business makes sense for you? And a tangential question to that is saying yes versus saying no to different things that pop up. Because I think that's also real talk to give people.
Absolutely. And I love that you did not ask balance, but I know we've talked about this a
Yeah.
lot. You as a serial entrepreneur, and a mom as well. Like, I don't believe in balance. I don't believe in that word at all. I feel like, as women, as wives, as mothers, as business owners, and then even for those who don't quote unquote fall into those categories, whether you're a caregiver or you just have
Right.
simply have other responsibilities, right? It's all about what is takes priority at that time and what makes sense. So for me to kind of go back to your first question, what's important to me is not only am I obtaining this knowledge through my industry experience and being a business owner over the years, but it's also extending that knowledge to other people so that they too can grow their businesses. Again, a lot of what I've learned and the things that I've experiences that I've had have simply come because someone was gracious enough to introduce me to someone else or help me along the way. And I want to make sure that that knowledge continues to get extended. Knowledge is not valuable if you do not pass it on, if you harbor it. So it's good that we reach as we climb to help other people. And that's why knowledge sharing about how I've been able to grow my business, how I've been able to expand my teams, how I'm able to work across organizations is very important to share the information so others may grow. But in the way that I manage it for me is again, just prioritizing what's important at the time. So for me right now, my big things this year are Venue Genius and mentoring through Business of Scale. Venue Genius is going to be a total lift and I'm super excited. It's like the baby of my businesses right now and it
Mhm.
requires the most attention. Of course, my other businesses, they've been established longer. They have teams. They're pretty much running themselves. And of course, I'm engaging with that. But right now, my priority is Venue Genius. And that's where my big focus is, alongside mentoring through Business of Scale. Because as we talked about, there's a huge gap in our ecosystem from the ideation to the expansion. And as someone who's been there, I want to be able to help with that. So those are my two focuses. And to your point, in terms of saying yes, in terms of saying no, that is where all of that lies. So if it doesn't fall within those priorities right now, does it help what I'm doing, my initiatives? If not, it's a no, and maybe just a not right now, and that's totally
Mhm.
fine. But if it falls in line with those things that I'm working on, just as long as it doesn't take up too much of my time, it'll absolutely be a yes as I can do it.
Something that helped me end of the year. So I always do like an end of year reflection. What do I want my goals for next year to be? But it's very much my own weird way of doing things and post-it notes. But I completely reconfigured how I spend my time. And I still binge watch a show or two and I'll of course hang out and play with my kids. But and my husband too. Love you, Michael. But I put everything in chunks now. Build, learn, and think. From a
Mhm.
productivity standpoint, if something doesn't fall in those buckets, I don't do it unless it's for fun. So building, whether it's vibe coding or working on different tools and apps, learning, reading, taking a class, and then thinking is literally free thought. It is just coming up with ways and diagramming a solution or diagramming. It has been life changing for me. It
Yes.
has been life changing. And yeah, AI assistants have been my interns helping with thoughts and organizing things. And just like the session that you were in and produced and gave, so many things can be automated. And let's go back to 10 years ago, because you talking about mentorship and giving back, I think is so crucial. And some of you who might hear this or watch this might think, and I'm being real, wait a second. So she came up with essentially a mobile bartending service, kind of, sort of. But guess what? It's been around for a decade. And I'm sure you've had fits and starts for a decade with not every client was the best client. You probably had some snafus or clients that were just not great or folks that you brought in to help for events that, didn't do that well for you. But as you mentioned a couple beats ago, you've had fits and starts. Someone's helping run that for you essentially. So you can focus on Venue Genius. I want to talk about that too, meaning it's been a decade.
Mhm.
When do you think, and of course, this is going to vary by vertical, by person, by founder, by thinker, what year do you think when Sumptuous Spirits was doing its thing? What year do you think like, okay, I can not coast a little bit, but I have this template down in this process. I can bring in like a general manager or head operating officer, whatever it may be. When do you think that happened for you with Sumptuous Spirits?
I love this question. Let me tell you why. Because I always thought in the beginning that I would
Mhm.
be kind of at the forefront of that because I just loved doing it and not necessarily being the face of it, but just being the thriver behind it. I love to
Yes.
see how things build and grow. What humbly made me step back and put someone in the forefront is when I was pregnant with my first child, my son, because I couldn't do it. Literally, I was 7 months walking around waddling at some of these events when my event manager Sabrina, shout out to Sabrina. If you guys have been to our events, you've probably seen her around before. And she's like, "You need to sit down. You need to sit down." And I'm like, "No, I'm great." No. As soon as I thought I was gonna be able to pop back up, that is not how life went for me. And that's when I actually had to take the time to say, "Okay, someone needs to kinda be there." And of course, again, I've never really bartended. It's always been my team, but to literally have someone administratively kind of
Right.
lead that in the forefront. Me being pregnant and having my child did that for me because now my priorities shifted. And I'll
Hmm.
never forget, I tried to, have my baby and go back to how things were. And that's when I really was met with the reality of that is no longer. What I had to really shift in my mindset was how do I operate going forward with managing being a mother of this little baby and also running a business. And so that's when I had to go through the highs and lows of like what delegation looked like, what success looked like, how do I automate for this business to work without me? And through those trials and growth, that's how I was able to make Sumptuous Spirits the machine that it is now because of that. So literally my kids are the reason why I had to make sure those things were in place.
I think this is such an important conversation, and I'm typically passionate when I talk to folks like this, but this topic in particular, I am so much more passionate about. And this is why
Yes.
women have amazing ideas. And I do believe that we are. I do think we're wired differently, whereby we can multitask a series of things differently than dudes. I do.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure science proved it. But just because you had children, at this time you just had one, but just because you had a child who were self-aware to think, okay, wait a second, I had a cool bang up idea. It's working. I'm now a mom. This thing isn't going to stop. What do I need to do to make sure this thing continues? And it pains me because so many women, when they have children, may not have the support staff or may not have the team or the people at home to assist, or
Absolutely.
they also leave corporate because the support systems in a corporate environment don't provide the ability to do both. And here
Absolutely.
you are, an entrepreneur, knowing this idea is still awesome. I can't do the thing all the time. How can I empower the team? This is the kind of thing that men don't need to think about. And
Nope.
I'm not trying to do a men versus women thing, but this is real because I come across so many women who have great ideas. And I think about myself, my kids now are teenagers. Well, 16 and 13. The youngest just turned 13. Crazy. But because they're a little older and more self-sufficient, Lauren, I have more time
Hmm.
to do more things because they aren't toddlers, they aren't babies. They don't need me to feed them. What you said, I think, is so poignant. And I hope women listen because you can be an entrepreneur, have a phenomenal idea, but it's okay to sit back like a guy, a guy might think, okay, what is my team? Like Tim Ferriss, the 4-hour work week.
Yeah.
What can I automate and what can I export to other people? Women need to have that same similar thinking. And is it guilt, Lauren? Is it guilt
Yeah. Oh, I was just
that
gonna
women
say, and
aren't doing
I have
that?
that mom guilt because I know I had it bad. But business goes on whether it's you or someone else. And
Right,
if you want it to be you, you do have to dial back to be like, okay, what is it that I need to do to make sure this engine keeps going? And being okay with the sit down, because like you said, and again, not putting men against women, but
right,
if a guy has, a partner that's pregnant, has a baby, once that baby gets here, technically you can be like, okay, girl, well, I'll be right back. I'm going to work. I'll come back home and help, right? But
right.
women, we literally physically cannot. We have to sit down to have our bodies heal, or if we're,
Yeah.
breastfeeding or pumping or whatever, literally we're not able to, right? So it's just like figuring out what we can do to manage and allow it to run and not feeling that guilt like, we just had a whole child, right? Or again, if you're not necessarily a mother, you're caregiving for someone, you have multiple responsibilities, you have a pet, whatever that is, we have that nurturing spirit. And so not having the guilt of like trying to manage both and figuring out what is it that we can do to sustain our businesses, which is again why I'm so passionate about how do we, especially as women, manage, automate, keep the ball rolling, provide you with resources to allow your businesses to grow while also being okay with the other responsibilities that we have.
I want to talk about trends with what you're seeing from an event standpoint.
Hmm.
So now that we have Venue Genius, coming online, You have all this experience with events you've run in all these 63 different cities. Are you seeing efficiencies or events planned in a different way? Typically, there's an event planner or there's someone managing the venue. To your point, always checking in back and forth. Talk to me about what you're seeing trend wise with events in general, and what are you seeing from a consumer standpoint as it relates to cocktails and or more mocktails coming into the mix as we're different folks are on different health journeys? What are you seeing?
Yeah, sure. So, three different things that I'm seeing. So, from the consumer side, guest side for events, experiences are king. So, whereas before you go to an event, you're fine with whatever's happening, an event is an event. Now, businesses are forced to differentiate themselves, in terms of what people experience so that they're remembered, so that they
Hmm.
actually get the business. So things like the bar are more important now. They're thinking about those things, the things that they smell, see, the way they engage with their businesses, not only with their products, but how they're consumed or what they're feeling. And so
Hmm.
events are definitely more activation. It's no longer just, throwing an event together and inviting people. How are people engaging with your brand, your product, the morals, your values, and how the brand is utilized and implemented in someone's lifestyle? So on the event side for the consumer, engagement is truly key. High-end activation. And when I say high-end, not necessarily experience, but things that are high touch that people can understand and have a feel for your business is one thing. On the back end of that, I think on the event side, running them with efficiency is super important, which is why technology like Venue Genius will be so vital. Because while people need to ensure that the consumers are highly engaged and that their businesses
Hmm.
are differentiated, they also need to make sure that they're somewhat running lean, especially in today's economy. So no longer are you going to have 40 people on the floor, right? You need to make sure you have those key team members that are in place to make sure things are going well and that they get as much of the event done as possible with as little people as possible to make sure events are running well.
Got it.
Back end of that, as it relates to consumption for beverages, what we're seeing now is I'm sure everyone's seen the reports where we're seeing that the alcohol sales are down extremely since the pandemic. They are saying that millennials are like the highest drinking age group that we've seen, and now you have the Gen Zers who are coming in who may or may not be engaging with alcohol as much, but just in general, a lot of people are coming down from things like dry January or drinking a ton during a pandemic and are no longer, or are more conscious of what they're consuming. So we're seeing things like mocktails and zero proof bars. We've literally done a ton of those where literally there's no alcohol and we're doing mocktails and zero proof bars, which are totally fine, but still allow people to, again, have that experience,
Yeah.
have a good beverage. They're not drinking Sprite and grenadine, but they still can have a good beverage that isn't necessarily alcohol, right? You know how that is. Like, I don't want the punch, being served. I still want
That's
it in
so
a
good.
glass.
I love that. That's the quote of the interview. Sprite and green.
Right,
Sorry.
and
That's awesome.
grenadine. Oh my gosh, yes. We're not drinking, the punch. That people still want a good drink. They just don't want the liquor.
Oh, that's the best. That's the best. Well, Lauren, I know that we're almost at our time, and this has been amazing. I mean, I knew of you. We've talked, like you said, one on one, but I've learned so much about how you think in different ways that all your businesses thread together. I think it is a tremendous, tremendous
Thank you so
story,
much.
not just for you and your fam, but also for the region, for the area. With you, kind of you started and started sticking it out during the resurgence. I think that's tremendous. As we end and you're on this journey with Venue Genius and getting that cranked up, what else would you like to share about the entrepreneurial journey, whether it's, here in Michigan or life as a founder? Any kind of like ending tips you'd like to provide folks?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll say, and as we kind of talked about, if you're here and you're building a business and you want to stay here, but you're frustrated, there is nothing wrong with going outside of where you are currently. As someone who is going to be probably raising outside the state of Michigan, it is totally fine to go out, see what these other markets are like, and then bring it back here. If you're tied here, right, to share the knowledge and bring the resources back to grow. Because essentially, we're in a grassroots effort right now with a lot of us that are in the ecosystem to really not look to, and I'm just speaking in general, not saying anything
Sure.
bad about anyone, but the state or other VCs and things to make those moves. We as founders can start doing that. Hey, I went to the Chicago markets. I went to Silicon Valley. I went to Miami. This is what they're doing. This is what I'm bringing back. These are the things that we can do to continue to grow and expand our ecosystem and bringing that knowledge back. So I say to the founder who has a great idea but feel like they're stuck or maybe not necessarily seeing the resources here, don't be afraid to go out, get those resources to come back and continue to grow, and share with your other founders who are like you and want to do better as well.
That is awesome. Lauren Daniels, thank you so much.
Thank you for
Entrepreneur,
having me.
serial entrepreneur, thinker, founder, innovator, and helper. It has been awesome to reconnect with you in this fashion.
Yes.
And I'm really excited to see what Venue Genius pops in 2026.
Yes, more to come.